So you're going to vote for the referendum, for the thing to protect abortion rights, and then you're going to turn and vote for Trump? I mean, how many votes are lost to Trump because of that in those states? We don't know. But Lester, I guess I'm asking you, is Florida in play?
You're listening to the USSC Briefing Room, a podcast from the United States Study Center at the University of Sydney, where we give you a seat at the table for a USSC briefing on the latest developments in U.S. news and foreign policy. We'll cover what you need to know and what's beneath the surface of the news. Hello, I'm Mari Kirk, Director of Engagement and Impact at the United States Study Center. Thanks for joining us on the USSC Briefing Room today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're recording on today. The University of Sydney is located on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. Despite years of circling in each other's orbits, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump only met for the first time on the debate stage on the 10th of September. Their face-off was the unofficial launch of the final stage of the U.S. presidential election. It was an opportunity for both candidates to make their case to the country and seek to woo those critical undecided voters. So how has the campaign changed since the debate? And did the candidates accomplish what they needed to? Where can both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump go from here to secure the 270 Electoral College votes they need on the 5th of November? To discuss these questions, I'm joined by two USSC non-resident senior fellows, Bruce Wolpe and Lester Munson. Both have a history on Capitol Hill in the U.S. and have an inside perspective on campaigning and what goes on behind the scenes in an election. Bruce is living in Australia now and is the author of Trump's Australia, and Lester is based in D.C. So thank you both for jumping on to join me today for this discussion.
Thank you, Mary.
And at the end of this episode, we'll get you by the numbers stat on the topic. So I think we're going to cover quite a few things. I'm looking forward to see what you've got in store. Just to kick off, after the debate, both candidates came out to say that they won the debate. But I'm keen to get your thoughts on who you think really won, and did the candidates achieve what they needed to do?
I thought Kamala Harris won the debate in more than one points. She really accomplished what she wanted to accomplish, which was to draw Trump out. She took him down, and then he took himself down at several key moments. And I think he did have one great answer at the very end of the debate, but after all the judgments were formed about it, if you were reviewing, he said, "You've been in power 3.5 years. What the hell did you do? You didn't act on any of this stuff." And that was, if he had opened with that, I think the dynamics of the debate would have been different. So I think she really helped herself. And even though Trump, well, he never meets an election that he lost, and he never meets a debate that he lost, but he lost. And and I think Trump in his heart was pretty angry about how things turned out.
Yeah, I largely agree with Bruce. I think Harris pushed just about every button Trump has, and he seemed to, it was like she was the puppet master behind the scenes, making him dance in ways that were bad for him and good for her. She got him talking about a lot of crazy conspiracy theories and wild assertions and outright lies and all of the stuff that he's very vulnerable on. She just inspired him to go right ahead and start talking about it. And she really turned in a great performance. She's a very good debater. Anyone who remembers the way she handled Joe Biden in 2020, I think it was actually 2019 in the primaries, when she made him look almost as bad as she made Trump look last week. She's a very tough debater. I think for some reason before the debate, the Trump campaign was talking about how good he was going to do and how bad she was going to do, which is a horrible way to set expectations. You should be doing the basic campaign 101 is you do the opposite. You lower expectations for yourself. You raise them for your opponent. The Trump people, for some reason, did the opposite and just got shellacked. I think it was, this would have been a technical knockout, or if it were a prize fight, I think it would have been called before it was over.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And she, it's always great. One of the greatest assets you can have in politics is to be underestimated. And she's been underestimated throughout this campaign, and she still is, to a degree, a significant degree. And it's helping her because she's outperforming. And also, if you look at the debate prep, she had her army of experts, and these are pretty seasoned people who have been in a lot of debates. And where Trump went for just sort of, quote, policy discussions, and he was surrounded by all men. They brought in Tulsi Gabbard because she was the only woman in the room. And when you're debating a woman, it kind of helps to have one around. So they really blew it.
Yeah, and I saw this interesting interview with Pete Buttigieg after the debate, and he was saying that Trump actually wanted to share these extreme views. So the whole comment about the immigrants are eating your cats and dogs and whatever. So that's the thing you're talking about after the debate. So he can dominate the media cycle and everyone will be talking about that rather than the policy or focusing on his policy failures. That's what Pete Buttigieg said. Do you think that's the case? Or do you think that, the other theory is, Kamala Harris set traps and Trump just stepped in it and went for it? So do you think it was a strategic decision or do you think it was a fumble on Trump's part?
Well, yeah, I think it's a great question. And Buttigieg, I think, has a point. But the reason, and Trump is certainly capable of, uttering falsehoods or exaggerating things to make a point and get people talking about things in a different way to change the context. He's a master at this. He's a showman. He's a con artist. He's all of those things. And he can change the way people are talking about stuff. He lies about how much money he's worth. So then you're talking about how much money he's worth. It's a generally an effective technique. He doesn't need to do that now. I think that's the issue here. And I'm not sure he realizes this. Like, he's got good arguments on the economy, on foreign policy that would be very effective against Kamala Harris. The Biden administration, for what, I'm trying not to be partisan here, just does not have a good track record, I think, on either issue. The polling backs that up. Americans are not happy about the economy. They're not impressed by Biden's foreign policy. Trump can offer alternatives and be the change in a way that could get him elected. So she's goading him into this, this kind of usual shtick he has about changing the conversation that keeps him away from these more policy-based arguments where I think he's on much stronger ground.
I agree, except for the foreign policy piece. I think Biden's foreign policy, particularly with respect to Ukraine, is admirable, highly admirable. And the efforts in the Middle East, even though it may yet turn tragic, even more tragic, I think he just shows what he can do. But in any event, Trump is in command on those issues, on immigration and on inflation. When people are asked, well, who do you trust to better manage these things? Those are the two hottest button issues in the campaign. Abortion is the third. And Trump is in a commanding position as he's seen as a better manager. That's a huge asset. And he didn't even get close to exploiting it in the debate. And that's why it was really a strategic failure.
And do we see a change in the polls after the debate to reflect, the assessment of the voters on who won the debate or on those policy issues or whatever else is convincing people? Did we see a change afterwards?
Well, she won the debate, but that isn't the important poll. The important poll is what happens to their relative standing. The race has been effectively deadlocked at both levels, national level and in the states, the swing states. She's gained so it's within 1 or 2 points that way. She's gained about a couple points. So she has widened. She has established, I wouldn't call it a clear lead or a consistent lead, but she's gained. And then I just saw earlier today a poll on the favorability, unfavorability. She's closed the gap. She was down 17 points unfavorable, matching where Biden was against Trump. And she's closed it. She's now even slightly ahead. That's a huge gain in perception, and that's important to what she needs to do. Trump did not lose any votes from his base in that debate. They are with him all the way. They're welded on. They believe every story. They love it, and they're going to stick with him. The question is, how much can she rebuild of what Biden put together in 2020 among all the demographics, Black men, Hispanics, younger voters, and others, women, and white men of varying degrees of college education. Can she put that together so that she wins in 2024? She's still in that process. She hasn't done it yet, but she's moving in the right direction, and he's not moving.
Yeah, I think I largely agree with Bruce. Again, she definitely got a little bump out of the debate. Trump's numbers are holding steady. Frankly, I think they're almost immutable. He's going to be at about 47% of the electorate almost under any circumstance. People see him as the bad boy. Enough people like that he's going to get 47% of the vote. Probably not going to go much above that. He's probably not going to go much below that. The question is, I think, can Harris maximize her vote and go get that 52.5% nationally that she's going to need to be competitive in the swing states, probably particularly of Michigan and Pennsylvania. It looks like right now those are going to be the two most important battlegrounds. And she's got little tiny leads of 1.5 or so points in those states. Is that going to be enough on election day? Trump's voters do get very motivated. They're more motivated generally than Democrats. So he's going to get his base out. Can she get her base out? And can she get a little bit more? Can she get that, tiny sliver of undecided or moderates? I think you're seeing her go after that. She is running a very moderate campaign. She has abandoned her previous positions, I would say, on the far left. Some would say liberal. But she has abandoned her positions on the left to advocate for things in the middle. She talks about middle class. She talks about values. She talks about buying a home, things that everyone likes, everyone agrees with. She's going after that middle ground. Trump is still running a get out the base kind of campaign. So I see she's got an advantage there because she's going at that, that number above 47 that she can get to, maybe up to 53% to actually win this thing.
I agree with everything Lester just said, but the thing to remember as well is that the polls have missed Trump voters. So he actually may be voting. They may have 1 or 2 points in the bet, that no one's counting yet that could show up on election day. Biden's margin in 2020, by the way, was 51-47, sufficient to win, but 40,000 votes in 3 states is like nothing. And so that's how tight it is.
It's going to be close. I do think the pollsters have learned and gotten better, and it's not the same as it was in 2016. There's more awareness of who's likely to vote and how things. So I think that that kind of weird advantage Trump has of being undercounted is mitigated by some of these developments with pollsters. But
we'll find out.
We'll see.
Yeah, we will see. So one of the polling groups that we've looked at with this election is the double haters, which we talked about a lot more earlier in the campaign, whereas about 1 in 5, roughly 20% of voters didn't want to vote for either candidate when it was Biden and Trump. But then that has dropped down to about 10% since Harris has replaced Biden at the top of the ticket. So where do you think those double haters have gone? And then who are the fringe groups that the candidates are vying for now? You mentioned that Trump is just trying to get his base to turn out. Is he going for anyone else, or is he just purely focused on that? And who is Harris trying to win?
Great question. I tend to think those groups end up getting divided, much like the rest of the populace gets divided. And it's really hard for anyone to kind of go for a strong advantage in a small group like that. Noticeably, none of us are talking about RFK Jr. supporters anymore. That's like gone from the discussion, right? He was, for a while, he was polling at like 15 or even 20%. And everyone thought, if you could just go get his supporters, you'll lock down this thing. His supporters went to both sides. There's not a linear thing here where if you abandon your one, if a voter kind of pulls back from their first choice, they're necessarily going to go to someone you think is their logical second choice. It doesn't quite work that way. That's why this, I would say this ranked voice, I'm going down a rabbit hole here. This ranked choice voting thing is kind of a mistake, but it's going to be a binary choice between Trump and Harris. And again, Trump is limited as to how far he can go in that scenario. He really can't get to 50%. He's got to win the exact right constellation of people in these swing states to prevail on this thing. That's what happened in 2016. He lost the popular vote by millions of votes. He managed to win because he got just enough in these key states. That's what he's going to be going for this time. So it's micro-targeting. In the debate, sorry, I'm going on way too long here. I apologize. But in the debate, they were both going after different ethnic groups in Pennsylvania and Michigan. Kamala Harris at one point made an open appeal for Polish American voters in Pennsylvania over the Ukraine issue, which was an interesting strategic move, I thought, because I'm not sure how totally logical that is. But That's the level of communicating we're down to in these campaigns, where they're trying to box each other out of different groups, different voting groups inside those key states.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There are a couple of things. Harris needs, again, she's in the process of regaining that Biden winning margin, and a lot of focus on Black voters. They're about 84% now. They really got to be at 90. Hispanic voters, there's about 57%. They got to be 65. Younger voters just have to turn out. I think Taylor Swift will help with that. I don't know how much, but they say Oprah was worth 1 million votes to Obama. Well, I think she'll take 500,000 votes from Taylor Swift. And so, it could be, but then the question is, where is it? Which raises another interest. The third big issue is abortion. Huge driver for women. There are several states voting on abortion rights referenda on the ballot in November. 2 swing states, Nevada and Arizona, I think that can be very helpful for Harris. In Missouri, which is a red state, Republican conservative state, the ballot initiative is close to 60. It's about 58% right now. And there's one in Florida. Now, Florida has one of the toughest abortion laws in the country. No abortions after 6 weeks. Now, millions of women in Florida are not happy. It'll be interesting to see, although I think it's a supermajority in Florida to carry that. I think they need 60%, but I'm not sure. But in any event, more than half it'll get to over 50% of the votes, I believe. And then the question is, on all these ballots, so you're coming into, and abortion is on your mind, abortion rights on your mind. So you're going to vote for the referendum, for the thing to protect abortion rights. And then you're going to turn and vote for Trump? I mean, how many votes are lost to Trump because of that in those states? We don't know. But Lester, I guess I'm asking you, is Florida in play?
Florida's not in play. Florida's not in play. Ohio's not in play. I think Bruce has a point on the abortion issue. Generally, better for Democrats right now. I think they can overplay that. It's not going to be, except for a few people, it's not going to be the number one voting issue. As Republicans are tempted to use immigration as particularly Trump, tempted to use immigration as his lead issue. It's a good issue for Republicans, but it shouldn't be the lead issue. Making immigration the lead issue is a path to losing. For Democrats, I think they got to be really careful on the abortion question. There's a lot of folks, there's more folks than people remember on the other side of that question. And they can unnecessarily alienate them. The best battleground for Republicans is the economy. That remains the most important issue. James Carville, as true today as he was in 1992, it's the economy, stupid. Talk about the economy. That's really a lesson for both campaigns. And I've seen Harris, yes, she takes a very tough pro-choice line for sure. The first thing she talks about is the economy. Owning a house, getting a job, building intergenerational wealth. She's talking about the issues that people care about. I'm not sure it's totally persuasive, and I'm not sure her policies will work, but she's talking about the things that really do matter to people. Trump's smart. He's going to start doing that too, even if he has to give up on some of his favorite conspiracy theories.
Lester, I really agree with what you're saying, the economy being a huge driver, and it's actually the same issue here in Australia as it is in the United States. Since Albanese and Biden were elected, inflation has gone up by 20 to 30% in the household basket of goods that it's not that the macroeconomy is doing great or unemployment is down or productivity is. None of that stuff. It's like, what am I paying today? And interest rates at record highs. And so that's the killer. I mean, the president owns the economy in the United States, and the prime minister owns the economy here, and that's why their approval ratings are so lousy.
Well, since we're thinking about, the different topics that might be on the ballot in November in the different states, I'd like to look a little bit at the down ballot races. How are they looking? Can you give us a readout on, the state of play in the race for Congress since the change of the Democratic ticket? How do we think we're looking in terms of the House and the Senate?
I'm happy to jump in here. I don't think it's changed, particularly the race for the Senate, which may end up being the most important race here at the end of the day, because people are going to, if Harris wins and she has to deal with a Republican Senate, it really is going to limit her legislative options for sure. And if Trump somehow loses the House or even possibly the Senate, which seems highly unlikely, then he's going to be very limited in what he can do. So I think in a lot of ways, the congressional races, don't come at me here, are more important perhaps than the presidential race, and are going to be more determinative of what kind of the U.S. policies are going to be going forward. In the Senate, it looks pretty good for Republicans to take over. They're going to win a seat in West Virginia that has been Joe Manchin and the Democrats for a very long time. They're very likely to win in Montana in John Tester's seat. That'll give them 51. That protects them no matter who wins as president. Republicans are probably going to control the Senate. In the House, I think it's a jump ball. The Democrats only need to pick up 4 seats out of 435 to take over the House. That looks very doable to me. They can pick up 2 pretty easily in New York and 2 pretty easily in California. And if they just hold their own on the rest across the board, they're going to, we're going to have Speaker Jeffries here in a couple of months. So my prediction would be, regardless of who wins the White House, you're going to have a Republican Senate and a Democratic House.
I agree. I agree. Republican Senate, Democratic House. I think that prospects in the House are stronger than what you're saying. I just think that they have more money, and they really know Hakeem. It's really very good compared to the chaos in the Republican leadership. And as we speak, they're in the midst of profound disagreements as to how to fund the government on October 1st. They look like a mess. And the Senate, yes, will be a Republican Senate. So burn this videotape after November 5th, when we're both wrong. But I really think there's the issue I have here. I mean, if Trump is elected Democratic House, then they can block everything that Trump wants to do. And then he goes into a wave of executive actions that are taken to the courts, and he governs through executive power. But if Harris is president, Democratic House, fine. Oh, and if Trump is president, Democratic House, he will be impeached a 3rd time. Within the first year.
4 times.
4 times. Do 1 a year, why not?
Yeah.
But as far as the House and Senate are concerned, so yes, she can get her program Democratic agenda through the House, good PR, take it to the Senate. But does it die? Not necessarily. She has one, not an infirmity, but she's not a great legislator. She's not known for her legislative skills. And certainly you can't compare her to Biden because that is legendary. But, she hasn't served as governor. And so she does not know how to she's far beyond, not up to Reagan standards, not up to Bill Clinton standards, not up to George W. Bush standards.
Bruce, you're doing a good job of lowering expectations. Very impressive.
Well, and that's why they said that, she needed to pick a governor or a legislator of some sort as
she has Walz, which can be helpful, but he's from the House, not necessarily. But the other thing is, if Trump loses, I mean, what are political parties in business for? To win. Well, we lost the 2018 House, we lost the 2020 presidency, lost the 2022 Senate, and now we lost the presidency for a 2nd time under this guy. Why the hell should we be following his ideology? So in other words, I think that frees up Senate Republicans to move away from Trumpism to a degree, because protectionism and nationalism and isolationism are kind of not isolation, but no wars. It's kind of attractive. But it means they'd be more willing to deal with Harris than we might think right now. That's what I'm saying.
Couple of thoughts, because I can talk a long time about congressional politics, and I apologize, not everyone is interested as I am. But if the Democrats take over the Senate, they're going to change the filibuster rule.
Yes, they will.
They're going to slick things through the Senate just like they go through the House, and there will be a very different outcome than if Republicans are there and they're keeping the filibuster, and they're going to act as a huge brake on anything Harris wants. Yes, deals will be cut. Yes, things will happen, but they will be very different things than if the Republicans happen to not pick up Montana, and then Tim Walz is casting a bunch of tie-breaking votes. That will be a very different congressional agenda.
But under your scenario, if the Republicans holding the Senate, what do you think? Can she get stuff through? Yeah.
Oh, I think she can get stuff through, and I think they'll cut some deals, but she's not going to get, it'll be a very different agenda. And I think, just given the flexibility on policy issues she has showed for the last couple of months, maybe she's fine with that. Maybe she's not going to go, Green New Deal and ban fracking and mandate EVs and all of that kind of stuff and all of the other issues where things get a little squirrely. And she's going to focus on stuff in the middle. Maybe that's a pretty good outcome for everyone. The one other quick point I'll make because Bruce kind of triggered this in my head. Democrats did a good job of purging their crazy people in primaries this year. Yeah, you had a couple of members of the so-called squad who lost primaries to much more moderate, palatable candidates in the suburbs that normal people think are fine. And good for Democrats for doing that. Republicans have stopped doing that for some reason and keep embracing the crazy. Learn from the Democrats. Do not embrace the crazy. Go for the folks in the middle who make sense.
I think the Republicans will go less Trump crazy if he loses the presidency.
I hope
so
you're
that's
right.
So this is a question, and I'm keen to get your take on it, Les, because at an event recently, former Congresswoman Barbara Comstock was with us, and she was saying that no one's going out publicly and saying this, but she said that, there's a cohort of Republicans in D.C. who are hoping Trump loses. They would never say that publicly, but they're hoping he loses because I guess then it would be like yet another election lost by his, MAGA approach. But are you hearing that in D.C. in Republican circles? Is that reflective of your conversations at all?
Well, I think she's right. I do think she's right. I have a lot of respect for Barbara Comstock. But I've not heard anyone whisper that to me or anything. There's no like secret cabal of Washington insiders like, God, I hope he loses. I don't think anyone's really saying that. Most people are kind of gently saying the alternative, which is like, well, if he's going to win, then I hope we get good people in there to do the right thing and help him implement something that makes sense and doesn't turn the country into civil war or something. I'm totally exaggerating. I don't think that's going to happen, but there is a lot of people inside the party who are anxious about a second Trump term, to be sure. And then the question is, what do they do based on that? One of the things I think about is who's going to go work for him, and then how will we treat those people? In the first Trump term, there were a lot of good people who went in to work for him, who, when Trump's term was over and he'd lost to Biden, couldn't get jobs, couldn't get work, were kind of punished for having worked for Trump. I think that's not a good thing for America. There are going to be good, even if Trump wins and he's a little bit crazy, there's still going to be good people in there working for him, trying to do the right thing for the country. And finding the ones who are kind of in that zone and helping them will be something that people in my party are going to be doing.
Yeah, but he'll vet them for loyalty, and there may not be many willing to go. Everyone has records, and they can find out who the true. I think he's going to move down to the third tier of just complete loyalists, which means that I agree with you. I think a lot of people went in; they're patriots. They want to have the guardrails, make the government work, and be responsible. And I think he's not looking for that, and there will be fewer of those, relatively speaking.
He's got to fill 7,000 jobs or something. There's not that many diehard loyalists. I mean, it's going to be, at a certain point, there's going to be the normies, if you will, who go in and serve in his campaign, just like the first time. He had issues in the first term for sure. He was not getting the best of the best in a lot of cases. A lot of people washed out and it didn't work very well. Under the best circumstance, if he does win, he gets better people who are better qualified, trying to do the right thing for their country.
Yeah. The Republican primary I like most is the D.C. primary because it's the one that Trump can never win. It's really great.
And we mentioned a little bit about Kamala Harris's running mate, Governor Tim Walz. And after Trump announced his running mate as J.D. Vance as well, there's been a lot of discussion about their picks and how it might change the race. Now, typically vice presidential candidates don't really swing elections, but they are chosen for a reason. Do you think they'll make a difference this time? And if so, what impact would J.D. Vance or Tim Walz have on the race?
Well, I think they've already had an impact. The Vance pick signaled to me that Trump is, and I think we knew this before, not interested in reaching out to the middle, not interested in reaching out to disaffected Republicans. If he had picked someone like Nikki Haley, and she was never really on the list, to be honest, but if he had picked her, we'd be in a completely different place right now where his base would be broader, I think. But that's not what he's going for. He's going for a get out the vote election. He wants to double down on his policies on nationalism and talking about the border and all that stuff. And so he went after Vance, who's kind of a slightly more intellectual, ideological construct of Trump's own instincts. I think generally on the Walz pick, I confess I was a little disappointed by that pick. I was hoping for Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania, who I thought is a more capable politician and closer to where I am on a lot of foreign policy questions. I think similarly, Harris, who's as I said earlier, I think making more of an effort to reach out to the middle. She was trying to satisfy certain aspects of her base, and we may talk about this a little bit later, on Middle East questions. And taking Shapiro would have been a big problem for her, particularly in Michigan and some other places, even though it would arguably help her in Pennsylvania. She's trying to win both Michigan and Pennsylvania, and she felt the better play to do that was to pick Walz over Shapiro. I think in the grand scheme of things, that's regrettable, and it may end up being a mistake for her, although I do think she's going to end up prevailing in the end.
Well, if she loses Pennsylvania, it'll be seen as a mistake by her. So we'll have to see about that. As far as Walz is concerned, he looks like middle America to me. Yeah, they want to paint him as an radical agrarian extremist socialist and everything like that. But I mean, God, he looks like your next door neighbor who would lend you a ladder, if you needed some help. So I think he's fine. I didn't know much about him, but I think he's done okay. And he has experience, 12 years in the House, 5 years as governor. And, that he brings stuff. The other thing is he goes to the Minnesota State Fair. It's the most popular fair in the country on per capita attendance or whatever. And the first thing he does is put a pork chop on a toothpick and starts eating it. I mean, what is more American than that? It's like terrific. So I think he relates, and I think he can help her. And given that Vance has shown to be negative, very unfavorable in his rating. So yes, he's doubled down on Trump, but the way he's expressed himself has really alienated some people. So I think Walz plays a little bit of help in swaying independent voters to break towards House. I'm not saying it's huge, but it might be, again, every point counts, right? So I think he's absolutely net positive for her.
Well, so I think Shapiro would have been more positive.
Yes. And I agree there was a Jewish problem, a Jewish constituency problem with an Israel problem with him, given divisions in the Democratic Party. She sidestepped that. But everything I've seen from Shapiro is that he absolutely wants to deliver, because there's always tomorrow in this business if you're a winner, right? And he absolutely wants to deliver Pennsylvania, and he would be seen as the kingmaker if in fact he did that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the foreign policy aspect.
The queenmaker.
Yeah, there we go. Have to update our terminology. Let's talk about foreign policy, because typically, again, this is not what sways American voters for the most part, but this is going to be a close election. And we are coming up on, the 1-year anniversary of the 6th of October attacks and the war in Gaza. And then if it's even impacting things like Kamala Harris's VP choice, it is playing an outsized role compared to what it normally does. So, Ukraine came up in the debate, and obviously Israel is front and center. And here in Australia, people are, thinking about rising challenges in the region, what that might mean. So I guess what's your view on where we're at on these hot button foreign policy issues, and how do you think they might play into the election?
I think historically over many elections, I think foreign policy successes help you win elections depending on their proximity to the election. So the first Gulf War, really, George H.W. Bush's popularity is close to 90%, but he lost the election a year later to Bill Clinton because of the economy. The Iraq War was ultimately exhaustive, and people were very dark about it. And so Obama had an easier time winning in 2008. Right now, I think there's broad support for Ukraine, but I don't think it delivers much, given that the issues are the economy and immigration and abortion and other things like that. But foreign policy failures can really hurt. And I think that Trump has exacted a price on the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and I think that resonates with people. There are two issues brewing as we talk. In Israel and Lebanon, that there's a chance that could explode into regional war. And in Ukraine, there's a very important decision coming up on missiles being supplied that could be launched into Russia. And what does Putin do in October if that happens? If those things really do go bad, well, Biden wears it and Harris wears it. And I think it would be a drag on her, notwithstanding all the potential upsides that we've seen. I think it would hurt. How much? Don't know. It depends on what happens. But there's a vulnerability there that really could change the outcome of the race.
I think in a lot of ways, and I'm pretty close to where Bruce is. I think in a lot of ways, foreign policy could be the swing issue in this election. Yes, the economy is the most important, but it's on some of these marginal voters and some of these get out the vote issues and some of the groupings, particularly in Pennsylvania and Michigan, foreign policy issues could be determinative of the outcome. Trump has a pretty good argument, I believe, that Biden has been a lackluster president on the foreign policy front. The world is aflame in many places that it was not really 4 years ago. There was a commission, a congressionally mandated commission on national security strategy that came out with a report a couple months ago that said we're closer to World War III than any time since 1945. And that talked about the situation in Ukraine with respect to Gaza, the rise of China pushing back against its neighbors in the Indo-Pacific. It is a very easy argument for Trump to go out there and say, the United States is not acting in a strong manner. We're demonstrating weakness, and our adversaries are taking advantage. And look at what is happening. Iran is teaming up with Russia, who's teaming up with China, and we've got this new situation that we did not have 4 years ago when I was president. Problem is, he decided not to make that argument during the debate. He decided to let Kamala Harris push all of his buttons. It would have been much better, I think, for the U.S. if you could have that discussion about those foreign policy issues. And I'll just go a little bit deeper. The Gaza issue in particular, the Arab American vote in Michigan, the Jewish vote in Pennsylvania, the nuances of the policy, and you saw it just today. Kamala Harris did an interview, a kind of interview with Black journalists on stage at an event. She talked about Gaza extensively and used some interesting terms because she's going after demographics in both Michigan and Pennsylvania on that very issue to get her just over the hump against Trump in those critical states. So I think the foreign policy details are more significant now than any election really I can remember in a while. It's not just, the Hawks against the Doves. This is much more nuanced. Which way are you going to tilt on specific issues? And both candidates are trying to have it both ways. And we're going to get into it when we do the numbers thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with what Les is saying. On Israel, though, and the Arab vote and the Arab American and Muslim American vote and so forth, I think that I don't think it'll be determinative in Michigan, but it certainly hurts. On the Jewish vote, the latest polls are that Jews will vote as they have for decades, 70 to 75% Democratic. And the Jewish community, in fact, is split over Gaza. I don't know where the majority lies, but there are grave doubts about what's occurred. People are horrified. Many are horrified by what's occurring there. So I don't think it's necessarily work. But the Arab American side is really important. But they're not going to vote for Trump. They'll stay home. And so that is, it's not as much of it's not a vote against. It's just they're not voting at that level.
So last question before I get your by the numbers stats, because I'm really intrigued. But in these final few weeks of the election, what would be your advice to each campaign team if they want to secure an electoral victory?
Second debate.
Yeah. There's going to be one. There's going to be a vice presidential debate. And I think if expectations are low for Vance, if he comes out there and does well and gets good reviews, that's going to bother the heck out of Donald Trump. And he's going to want to get his own good reviews on a debate. That'll inspire him to demand a second debate. So, I agree with Bruce. Let's have more debates.
On the other hand, if he does badly, he could be X'd off the ticket. Really?
Yes.
So anything could happen.
That's the October surprise.
But there is one issue in that debate which has not surfaced yet, which I think is really telling, and again could work with independents and other undecided voters. His total experience in government is 2 years in the Senate. If Trump dies or leaves office, he becomes president. What kind of president is he going to be?
He'd be like Barack Obama.
It's really, sorry, 4 years in the Senate. but he had a Joe Biden. He had a Joe Biden to deal with but I think you can scare people with his lack of experience and an unknown quantity becomes president. And I think that could be, you can weave that into trouble.
Vance is doing a good job of lowering expectations.
Donut shop, Vincent.
I don't know if that's been the whole strategy so far, but he has a lot of room for growth. Let's put it that way.
It's lower than Kamala, that's for sure. That's right. We underestimate you.
Yeah. So now I'd love to get your by the numbers stats. Les, I might start with you because you teased it earlier, so I'm really keen to find out, what do you have for us?
So my deep research, there's 300,000 Jewish votes in Pennsylvania. There's 500,000 Arab American votes in Michigan. I'm not trying to set them up as against each other or anything, but that's instructive as to the micro-targeting that these campaigns are going to do in those states, going after specific groups of voters on nuanced issues. During the debate, Trump made an interesting claim that Arab Americans should be voting for him too, because he'll have such a good Middle East policy. He knows how many Arab American votes there are in Michigan, and he doesn't see any reason why they can't vote for him. He's going to be going for those as much as Kamala Harris is. Obviously, they're doing it in very different ways. Harris's communication and on the ground strategy is a little more nuanced. Trump is a little more bombastic and trying to do symbolic things and shake things up and reframe questions. But both of those campaigns, the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign, are going after groups like those, even smaller groups, to win in those critical states of Michigan and Pennsylvania.
Fascinating. That's really insightful. And we're going to be, when the results come in, we're going to be analyzing which states and which pockets and factions and which states make the difference. So I have a feeling we'll be referring to that again. How about you, Bruce? What do you have?
Well, this favorability statistic that Kamala has regained 17 points in favorability, they're coming from somewhere. So they're coming from people who abandoned Biden because they were the double haters, just unenthusiastic about him, and understandably so. But it also means that the people in the middle, the few that are, 5% of the electorate, Lester, are undecided, that they are breaking her way, and that could be the margin. So I think she's on the right trajectory. Can she hold to it and ultimately prevail in it?
Yeah, and as we head into October, that's what we'll be watching. It's going to be a nail biter.
There will be more shocks in October.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, I would like to point out a couple of other podcasts that may be of interest to our listeners. Our CEO, Dr. Michael Green, is co-host of the Asia Chessboard podcast with Jude Blanchett, the Freeman Chair for China Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And I'd also recommend checking out our USSC Live podcast series that runs recordings from our major live events, including our 2024 Election Watch series. You can find these on our website at ussc.edu.au or wherever you get your podcasts. Bruce and Les, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great.
It was a lot of fun.